there are scholars who would have you believe that this scene describes Ruth's attempt to get Boaz drunk, to sleep with him, to get pregnant by him so that she can coerce Boaz into marrying her. Now, where in the world would they get that? That sounds ridiculous, but here's the thing. Given the Hebrew language in this text, it's actually not unimaginable. There are many word choices used by the author that have double meanings in the ancient Hebrew culture. And at points, the author's descriptions are intentionally vague. So what is described here can be interpreted to be pretty scandalous. Now, just because something can be interpreted a particular way doesn't mean that it must. And so let me be clear and put your minds at ease. Nothing scandalous happened that night at the threshing floor. There's nothing wrong with allowing a little bit of suspense in a church setting, but you all don't know me that well. I don't have that kind of rapport, that kind of trust with you, so I need to earn that right now by letting you know this ain't gonna get crazy. The Bible is still true. Ruth and Boaz are still pinnacles of godly holiness and purity. Just rest assured. But we're still going to get in the weeds a little bit. We're still going to dig into this and find out what's going on here because I think it's important. It would seem that the author wants to allow for the possibility of our minds to go there as we read this passage. This is what I'm talking about. We need to understand what the author is doing with the language. There's double meaning. There's intentional vague communication. For instance, how much did Boaz have to drink? It doesn't say. He's being intentionally vague. Another word here that's really significant is in the Hebrew language, to uncover someone, specifically to uncover their nakedness, is an expression that implies sexual contact. So if you turn to Leviticus 18 and read through Leviticus 18, it is a list of unlawful sexual relationships, and all of them are preceded by the phrase, you shall not uncover the nakedness of blank, and it's given a particular relationship that you should not pursue intimacy with in that way. You shall not uncover the nakedness of so-and-so. You shall not uncover the nakedness of this person. You shall not uncover the nakedness of that person. I'm going to make it a goal to say the word nakedness as many times as possible. So this phrase can be used for that, but then we would think, well, Ruth didn't uncover Boaz's nakedness, just his feet, right? Well, hold on. Let's check out this word feet. Even this word is vague. So the Hebrew language and the Hebrew culture, they used a lot of euphemisms, a lot of words that didn't sound as harsh in order to be able to communicate truths without really saying things that might be offensive. And so feet can also be used as a word for legs or the whole lower half of a person, including what is between the legs. No joke. And so what did Ruth uncover? Was it his feet or was it something more? Then it says that she lays down. This just doesn't stop. To lay down with someone is just like our expression to sleep with someone. It can mean literally sleeping or literally laying down. It can also imply a sexual relationship. You can understand why some scholars look at this the way that they do. The strangest part is that the author appears to be doing this intentionally. Listen, the Bible was not written by dummies. The Bible is the most genius work of literary art ever composed. And Ruth might quite possibly be the greatest short story ever told. This is beautiful, what the author is doing. He's doing something very intentionally. So how do we know this passage doesn't describe a sexual relationship? In short, Boaz says that she's a worthy woman. Worthy woman in Hebrew is the same expression used for the woman in Proverbs 31, an excellent wife, a worthy woman who can find. Scripture would never uphold Ruth's character if what she did here was a scandal in any way. we can be clear that Ruth was not soliciting Boaz in any scandalous way. So then why does the author use this kind of language? Well, first, it's just great storytelling right off the bat. I mean, are you not on the edge of your seat? Do you not want to know what is going on here? The author is an incredible storyteller, but more specifically, the language that the author is using is alluding to a couple of incidents from earlier biblical history. Can you think of a time in Scripture that involved the Moabites, it involved a drunken man, an unlawful sexual relationship in order to preserve a family's line? This is literally how the Moabites came into existence. This is how Ruth's family came into existence. Lot, Abraham's nephew, had 2 daughters, and the oldest daughter got her father drunk, slept with him, was impregnated by him, named her child Moab, and then convinced her little sister to do the same thing. In a culture when people were encouraged to memorize the Bible, this story is certainly playing in their heads. A man who's been drinking, a Moabite woman, in need of continuing on the family name. Without a doubt, that's what they're thinking. But then again, in the book of Numbers, there's another incident with Moabites and the Israelites. The king of the Moabites, after failing to curse the Israelites through the sorcerer Balaam, decides that he's going to send the female Moabites into their camp, seduce the men, and cause them to follow their gods and leave the God of Israel. Again, a student of the Torah in ancient Israel would see these stories all over the scene and be tempted to write Ruth off as just another Moabite. She's just another inbred, idolatrous Moabite. The ambiguous language that the author is using is recalling all this anti-Moabite sentiment in order to make the reader assume a pessimistic outcome, especially given the context of the world where Ruth lives. She lives in the time of the Judges. If you read the book of Judges, it is failure after failure after failure of God's people and God's leaders even failing time and time again. The reader's mind is set up already to say, here we go again. Here we go again. God's people are going to fail again. We read it with pessimistic eyes. But chapter 3 presents an opportunity for Ruth and Boaz to crash and burn like the rest of their generation, and yet their righteousness is confirmed. They actually become a picture of the way God's people are called to live, to love one another, and to love God in such a way that it stands in stark contrast to the rest of culture. So this kind of love for God and love for people was uncommon in Israel during the time of the Judges. And so for 2 people to be pursuing righteousness in this context is very uncommon. Now, it's uncommon for 2 Israelites to be pursuing God in this way. Now, consider that Ruth is not an Israelite. She's a Moabite. She's got no claim to the covenant blessing and promises of God. She's not entitled to fellowship with God and his people. She was not under the law, and yet she lives more righteously than the rest of her generation, who are just a few generations away from the people who literally walked through the Red Sea. They saw God's miraculous work of redemption, and yet she did not, and yet she follows him as her Redeemer, greater than the rest of her culture. So when placed over the backdrop of the book of Judges, Boaz and Ruth are examples of incredible, uncommon love. An uncommon love for God and all of those who trust him. I think this is the point that the author is making.